Okay, let's move on to the new lecture. I just introduce you some concepts so that by next week we can complete this lecture. And this lecture is very important for the exam point of view also, because here we have some scheduling algorithms. I told you in the beginning itself, like we have to understand the way how do the CPU is going to schedule our jobs. There are many processes running, and please do remember that here we are not talking about, I told you this point also before, we are not talking about one computer, one user here. Imagine that there is a server and there are group of process want to execute in the system. Okay, so in that scenario, in that situation, or even in one computer, when we want to run more than one process at the same time, how do the CPU exactly schedules it? That's what is about the main theme of this lecture, CPU scheduling. We understand how do the scheduling happens. So to understand that point, we need to know the criteria for scheduling, like what points it will consider before applying the scheduling algorithms. That is criteria for scheduling algorithms. What are all the concepts it will consider for scheduling algorithms? Now, these are the algorithms we are going to study. We are going to work out the examples on first come, first serve, priority. There is another algorithm called shortest job first. There is an algorithm called round robin. So we are going to work out on 4 example algorithms. And this is just to understand the concept of multi-level queue algorithm, which is combination of some algorithms. Okay, so first we'll understand this point today and try to get into the remaining algorithms in the coming lecture. So what is the criteria for scheduling is, so normally why do we have to do the scheduling is, so the maximum CPU utilization obtained with multi-programming. So what do you mean by multi-programming? We want to run more than one program, that is multi-programming. Why do we do that? Maximum CPU utilization, because I told you the concept of hospital example, like when one doctor is, just if you remember the previous class examples of queues. So one doctor, looking at one patient at a time, it is going to take waste of the time of the doctor. We are not utilizing the resources properly. We want to utilize maximum CPU utilization. To do that, what we need to do, we need to do multi-programming. So which means we need to run multiple process. And how do we do that? Normally process 1 will go to the system. Then if there is any input and output, remember last lecture number 2 I gave you the cues. When there is any input and output happens, process 1 will be out of the system, then process 2 will enter into the system. Likewise, whenever the CPU has to do input and output burst cycle. What do you mean by input and output burst cycle? Like if there is any input and output happening in the process execution, then we are going to change the process. Okay, so CPU input and output burst cycle process execution consists of a cycle of CPU execution and input and output. What do we mean by that? The process will go to CPU for some time. Then if there is an input and output, it will go out of the CPU for doing input and output. Again, it will come back to input and it will come back to the CPU. Likewise, it will be like a cycle, one after the other. Okay, now if you look at this example here, the process will start. Okay, this is a CPU burst. Please remember, this burst means it's a time. Burst means it is a time, or this is the scenario where the CPU is being executed. The CPU is working. So we load. Don't take the example to understand every line here. Just understand that first some operation like loading the data, reading from the file. The CPU is doing some job. Now the process went for input and output. Maybe the user want to write something into the file, and maybe the user want to print from the file. So now input and output is happening. So we call it as a input and output burst. Now again, the input and output job is completed. We want to do the remaining job of the program, like store the data or do something, write the data onto the file. Like for example, if you take this example, the user open the file and now making some change into the file. So that is input and output. Now after the input and output has been completed, now the CPU is working to store the data onto the file. Again, there might be some input and output, that is input and output burst. Then load the data, that is the CPU. Then finally, like this, it will be like cycles. That is called as CPU input and output burst cycle. Process execution consists of cycle of CPU execution and input and output wait. Now, why are we discussing this point? Is when, imagine this is process 1. Okay, this is process 1. Now process 1 is in CPU. When it is out for the input and output, now CPU is free. It's not doing anything. The CPU is free. So what can we do during this time? We can bring process 2 so that during this time of input and output, the CPU can be busy. Like I gave you the hospital example. When the patient entered to the doctor, now this is patient 1. Patient went for medical test. Now what we do to the doctor will not be just sitting blank. We bring patient 2. Then patient 2 went for the test. Then we bring patient 3. So what is our idea? We don't want to make the doctor free for any time. We want to utilize the doctor. Same thing happens in the system also. Here the doctor is CPU. Sorry, the doctor is now CPU. So when process 1 is going for input and output, we bring process 2. Process 2 is going for input and output, we bring process 3. Process 3 has completed the job, we bring process 4. Likewise, we want to utilize the CPU to the maximum. So that is where we are going to understand this CPU burst cycle so that we can have a proper distribution of the work of the CPU. So now what happens here? We need to learn about scheduling. What do we mean by scheduling here? Remember long-term scheduling, short-term scheduling, lecture number 2. Long-term scheduling, bring the data. I will remind you the concept. Or anyone remember? What is long-term scheduling, short-term scheduling? In long-term scheduling, from where we bring the data to where? Anyone remember? Long-term scheduling. Okay, I will remind. Next week you will remember, because after the quiz, you will prepare for the quiz, then you will remember everything. That's why we have the quizzes in between, to make you revise the concepts. Okay, so what is long-term scheduling? Take the data from the hard disk, load onto main memory. This is long-term. Now what is short-term? We have a process in the main memory. Take the process from the main memory and load onto CPU. So this is short term. So what is short term? The short term scheduler selects among the process in the ready queue. Where is this ready queue? In the main memory. Ready. I told you the patient is now ready to go to the doctor. In the same way, the process is now ready to execute. Where is this process? It is in ready queue. Where is ready queue? It is in the main memory, and allocates the CPU to one of them. So what we are doing in the short-term scheduling, it will take the job from here and send to the CPU. That is short-term scheduling. Okay, so what includes in the scheduling? CPU scheduling decisions may take place when a process switching from running to waiting state. Now I gave you the example. Running to waiting state means what? The CPU was working for process 1. Now process 1 wait for input and output, which means the CPU is now waiting. So it is blank. Like I gave you the doctor example. One patient went for some medical test, the CPU is free. Another example, switches from running to ready state. Now one particular process or a CPU is now ready to get executed and switches from waiting to ready state when one process is now getting ready after completing the waiting. So now it wants to come. So likewise, in many situations, we need to do the scheduling. What do we mean by scheduling? Select the job from the main memory and send to the CPU. Okay, so scheduling under 1 and 4 is non-preemptive. What do you mean by preemptive, non-preemptive? I will tell you in the coming slides. Don't take it now. Preemptive means we can stop the process. Non-preemptive means we cannot stop the process. Just remember briefly. Okay, so what is preemptive? We can stop the process anytime. Non-preemptive means we cannot stop the process, we have to wait the process to complete. That is preemptive, non-preemptive. What do they say? Scheduling under 1 and 4 is non-preemptive, which means when the process switches from running to waiting state, until it has been completing the waiting part, we cannot run the process, so we have to wait. That is non-preemptive. Even after termination, it is non-preemptive. So if you don't understand these 2 points, wait. I will explain in the coming slide what do you mean by preemptive, non-preemptive. Okay, so we need to consider access to the shared data, consider the preemption, while in kernel mode, consider the interrupt occurring during the crucial operating system activities. These points you will not understand now. First, let me complete preemptive, non-preemptive, then we'll see about this. Now, scheduler. We talk about the scheduler. Who is going to decide which job, which process will go to CPU? This is the scheduler. Like I give you the general example. Registration department is making a timetable. Okay, they decide the timetable. Okay, so they create the timetable deciding which teacher will take the class first, which teacher will take the class next, which teacher will take the class later. So this is registration department is responsible for timetable. That is the job of the scheduler. The scheduler is going to decide which process will go to the CPU, like which teacher will take the class. Now, who is going to execute the timetable? It is the teachers, and the students are going to execute the timetable. Registration department are not going to execute the timetable. Their job is to just create the timetable for us. We are going to run this timetable. That's why we are dispatchers. What do we mean by dispatcher? Dispatcher is the module gives control of the CPU to the process selected by the scheduler, which means dispatcher is the module in the operating system which is going to select the job from the job queue and give the job to the CPU. So understand, scheduler is going to make the plan, dispatcher is going to execute the plan. So they are the two things: scheduler, dispatcher. Scheduler makes the plan, dispatcher executes the plan. What is that plan? Changing the job from one job to another job in the CPU. When the dispatcher is going to do that, context switching. What the dispatcher is going to do? Context switching. Context switching means what? I will explain in the coming slide. Context switching means changing between the jobs. When process 1 complete the job, we want to run process 2. Process 2 complete the job, we want to run process 3. Like changing between the job is called as context switching. Remember switch, right? We have switch in the home. We make it on, we make it off. Same thing, change, right? We change. In the same way, we want to change between the jobs or the process. Okay, and the dispatcher also do changing the user mode. For example, I am working in the admin mode, administrator mode, but now there is another process which works in the user mode, so we have to change it. Okay, and also it is responsible for jumping to the proper location in the user program to restart the program from there. So what do we mean by this? I gave you the example already. So we have program counter. Remember, just today also we discussed. So program counter, this line we need to execute now, program counter. So what the dispatcher will do, it will jump to the proper location here and start the instruction from here. That is the job of the dispatcher. Okay, what is dispatch latency? The time it takes for dispatcher from stopping one process and starting another process is called as a dispatch latency. Okay, and also we call it as a context switching time. Okay, I normally explain this point with the help of one example. Okay, suppose teacher A has completed the class. Now teacher B want to take the class. Imagine you are in a college. Okay, so imagine you are in a college. Now this is a classroom. Teacher A has completed the job. Now teacher B want to start the class. Okay, so in between this, there will be some time, or immediately can teacher B start the class? I mean, if one teacher stop the class and to another teacher start the class, in between, do we need some small amount of time, or immediately can the teacher B start the class? Tell me, what is your thought? Teacher A, just understand my question. I am teaching 25 students in the class. Okay, so I am teacher A. I am teaching 25 students in my class. I stop my class. Now teacher B is waiting with another 30 students outside. Can the teacher B immediately start the class, or it will take some time between the changing of the classes?
It will take time.
It will take time because we have 20 students sitting inside the class. I will take some time to close my laptop. Okay, and all 25 students have to leave the classroom. After everything has been completed, I close everything. I close the computer. I close my my files. I take my bag, everything. Then only after every student has left the class, then teacher B can enter into the class, which means there is some time in between, right? Changing between the classes, there is a time. Not much time. It will not take much time, but little amount of time, maybe 5 minutes to start between one class to another class, because it will take at least 5 minutes for me to close everything, other teacher to start everything. So this time, what is this time? Changing the class. So to change the class, we need some time. In the same way, in the in the computer, one process is working in the CPU, and we want to run process 2 in the CPU. Okay, so now if you remember the same concept, do you think exactly after P1 stops, P2 will start again immediately? Now relate my same example of the classroom. P1 has completed the job and P2 want to start. Do you think it will start immediately? Or here also there is a time? So what is your answer? Do you think it will start immediately or it needs some time?
Make it some time.
Yeah, it needs some time. That some time in the computer is very small. It's milliseconds. It's milliseconds, very small time. Why? Because it has to stop process 1. It has to, like I told you the teacher example, remember easily. It has to stop the class. Okay, process 1 has to stop working. It has to clear the memory. It has to clear the CPU. CPU has to remove everything from inside. Then only process 2 will enter into the CPU. And process 2 has to load inside the CPU, and CPU will start executing the process. Now this time between changing the jobs is called as dispatch latency. Remember this. What is dispatch latency? It is the time it takes for the dispatcher to stop one process and start another process. Like I told you, stop one class of the teacher and start another class of the teacher. In between this, we need a time. That time is called as a dispatch latency, or we call it as a context switching or switching context time. So that is what is very important, because it is a little time, but there is some time. It is not like 0 milliseconds. It will be some time because it takes some time to remove the process and take some time to load the process into the memory. So that is called as the job of the dispatcher. So we discussed about 2 points. Scheduler is going to schedule the jobs, which is decide the timetable kind of thing, and dispatcher is going to execute that job. Okay. Now, finally, with this one slide, I will complete. Now, this is what you can see the example. Process 0 was executing. Now, something has happened. Like the user want to do input or output, or the user want to do something. Now, what happens here? Process 0 stop working. When process 0 stop working, we need to save what it was doing. Because if you look at the process, so it was running. We stop it here. So next time when we start, we are not going to start from the beginning. So we need to know the program counter. So that is what it will save. It saves the state into what is PCB. I told you today also, in the previous lectures also, process control block, which means it will remember what it was doing by saving it. Then what happens? Process 1 will start to run. Okay, process 1 will start to run. After some time, maybe there is something happened, like process 1 is going for input and output, or the user want to do some other option. So there is an interrupt or a system call. Then what we need to do? We need to remember what PCB1, process 1 was doing. So here, this is process 1. So we need to remember what it was doing by storing the PCB. Okay, so the interrupt will happen. We need to save what it was doing. Then we need to reload the state from PCB0. So we need to go here. We need to go here and see what process 0 was doing. And we need to start running the instruction. Same thing happen. After some time, maybe process 1 want to run. We'll stop it. We'll remember it, the program counter. Then we'll start running the process 1. So this is called as, now what is happening if you observe this picture? There is a change between the process. Process 0 was working, then we change with process 1. Process 1 was working, we change with process 0. This is called as context switching, or we call it as a switching context also. Remember, both of them are same. Context switching, switching context. What is context switching or switching context? Changing between the process. But what is the main point we need to keep in our mind? We need to save what the previous process was doing, because we need to restart from the same location. We cannot go back and start from the beginning. For that reason, we need to remember what it was doing so that we can start from the same location, or we can reload from the same location. For that reason, we need to save. This is called as context switching. So hope the points are clear. Okay, so I will stop with that for today. That's enough. I will stop with that for today. Now we are going to understand, why do we do scheduling? What is the criteria for scheduling, and what are the scheduling algorithms? Preemptive, non-preemptive also I will explain in the next class. So I'll stop with that for today. So when we come back, we'll start from this slide. Hope all the points are clear.